they they were attached, and he was particularly attached to the female bird. Whatever she wanted, he would go and do whatever inconvenience it was. That was because that was his attachment. And then after some time, they had little pigeon babies, and the pigeon babies were cute, and it describes them. And so he and she, the mother and father, were off getting some food for the little baby pigeons. And little baby pigeons were unattended when a hunter saw them, and he threw a net, and they were caught in the net. The female pigeon came back, mama pigeon, saw the little baby pigeons, and she freaked out. And she went rushing to the rescue and got caught in the net. And then, so the male pigeon saw all of this, and that's where we are. Starting with text 68. The male pigeon said, "Alas, just see how I am now destroyed. I am obviously a great fool, for I did not properly execute pious activities. I could not satisfy myself, nor could I fulfill the purpose of life. My dear family, which was the basis of my religiosity, economic development, and sense gratification, is now hopelessly ruined." And the BBT commentary reads, Srila Sridhar Swami explains that the word atriptasya indicates that the pigeon was not satisfied with the sense gratification he had achieved. Atriptasya. Although he was completely attached to his wife, children, and nest, he could not sufficiently enjoy them, since there is ultimately no satisfaction in such things. Akratartasya indicates that his hopes and dreams for future expansion of his sense gratification were now also ruined. People commonly refer to their, quote, home sweet home as their nest, and money put aside for future sense gratification is called a nest egg. Therefore, all of the lovebirds of the material world should clearly note how their so-called wife, children, and fortune will all be dragged away in the hunter's net. In other words, death will finish everything. Okay, that was 68. 69. My wife and I were an ideal match. She always faithfully obeyed me and in fact accepted me as her worshipable deity, but now, seeing her children lost and her home empty, she has left me behind and gone to heaven with our saintly children. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes in his commentary, She was suitable and faithful, accepting me as her deity, but seeing her home empty, she has left me behind and gone to heaven with our saintly children. Text 70. Now I am a wretched person living in an empty home. My wife is dead, my children are dead. Why should I possibly want to live? My heart is so pained by separation from my family that life itself has become simply suffering. Text 71. As the father pigeon wretchedly stared at his poor children trapped in the net and on the verge of death, pathetically struggling to free themselves, his mind went blank, and thus he himself fell into the hunter's net. And commentary reads, as the father pigeon wretchedly stared at his poor, motionless children trapped in the net and on the verge of death, he lost his intelligence and also fell into the hunter's net. Seeing the motionless children in the net, he also fell in the net. 72. We're almost done. 72. The cruel hunter, having fulfilled his desire by capturing the head pigeon, his wife, and all their children, set off for his own home. Text 73. In this way, one who is too attached to family life becomes disturbed at heart. Like the pigeon, he tries to find pleasure in mundane sex attraction. Busily engaged in maintaining his own family, the miserly person is fated to suffer greatly, along with his family members. And Bhaktisiddhanta writes, one who is too attached to family life becomes overburdened with grief and anxiety. Text 74, the last and final one. The doors of liberation are open wide to one who has achieved human life. But if a human being simply devotes himself to a family, like the foolish bird in this story, then he is to be considered as one who has climbed to a high place only to trip and fall down. And Bhaktisiddhanta's purport. Human beings are more qualified to achieve eternal benefit than the living entities in other life forms. Living entities such as animals and birds are less intelligent. It is easily seen by human beings that they are unable to give up attachment for their wife and children. In the same way, human beings who do not understand the consequences of miserable materialistic life become attached to enjoying the association of their fellow humans, and thus are just like the pigeon family. As long as human beings are alive, they should try to learn these lessons from the above-mentioned 8 spiritual masters, and thus attain life's ultimate goal, to see the earth, air, sky, water, fire, the moon, the sun, and the pigeon. That's the 8 so far out of 24. Earth, air, sky, water, fire, the moon, the sun, and the pigeon. With mere knowledge of the external world will only increase one's thirst for sense gratification. But with sharp internal vision, if one considers them as worshipable rather than objects of his enjoyment, then his inclination towards Krishna will increase, and he will become eligible to attain liberation, even while living in this world. And there's a little reference to this found in a book written by, this is the last, Sahotra Swami, a Prabhupada disciple, wrote a book. He wrote several books. So one is Dimensions of Good and Evil. Interesting title. And the paragraph here is, the story hinted at is of a male pigeon who returned to his nest to discover that a hunter had caught his wife and babies in a net. Abandoning all hope, the bird flew purposefully into the same net, sacrificing a life he considered useless. A creature, like a bird, cannot find a purpose for itself beyond slacking its physical desires and working hard to maintain family relationships. In contrast, the human form is called Mukti Dvaram, or a doorway to liberation, from physical desires and family relationships, Lord Krishna confirms that all human beings, even those classed as fallen, can pass through the portals of liberation if they just surrender to Him. Now, a delightful feature of all of this from the beginning of this discussion is some really wonderful artwork by Shruti Mangara. I don't know if she's listening, but you'll see. She's very talented. So she's taken sections from the verse or purports from several verses and illustrated them. So here's one. Srila Sridhar Swami explains that the word atriptasya indicates that the pigeon was not satisfied with the sense gratification he had achieved. Now, those aren't pigeons, but that's okay. There's little babies in their nest. Although he was completely attached to his wife, children, and nest, he could not sufficiently enjoy them since there's ultimately no satisfaction in such things. Those are pigeons. In this way, this is verse 73. In this way, one who is too attached to family life becomes disturbed at heart. Like the pigeon, he tries to find pleasure in mundane sex attraction, busily engaged in maintaining his own family. The miserly person is fated to suffer greatly, along with all his family members. There's 3 chapters of this coming, like it's heavy. If we don't get it at the end of 3 chapters, I don't know if we're going to get it. Okay, last. The doors of liberation are opened wide to one who has achieved human life. But if a human being simply devotes himself to family life, like the foolish bird in the story, then he is to be considered as one who has climbed to a high place only to trip and fall down. So there's one of Sri Radhika's questions related to all of this is from the other, one of the other days was motivation by blame and shame and that kind of thing. So we discussed that topic. I'll cover it again. Personally, I can say one of the troubles, one of the difficulties and struggles I had with some brands of Christianity was the burn in hell if you don't. Scare tactics. Accept Christ, because if you don't, you're going to go to hell and burn. So accept Christ. You're going to get spanked if you don't do what I say. Or God is this, personality that's sitting up in a big seat, just waiting for you to slip up. And when he does, when you slip up, you get the harshest punishment. So that's not the Lord that I want to serve and be. So anyway, motivation. It has its place. My understanding is this: it has its place where motive ignorance is very prevalent. You better watch out. It's like the Christmas song. Santa Claus is watching. You better not pout. You better not cry. Because Santa Claus is coming to town. And if you're even bad, you're not going to get toys. So that may have some limited effect temporary and limited, as material things are temporary and limited for persons that are moved by the mode of ignorance. But it's not sustainable. It doesn't bring one to goodness either. It may be, something, but something is better than nothing, perhaps you can say. But that's not the intention of this story or the other parts of the Bhagavatam that are giving indication. Our discussion the other day was, it's just reality. And if you're presenting reality for the sake of being clear what reality is, then it's not scolding or admonishing or threatening or intimidating or mode of ignorancing, getting someone to sit straight, because if you don't sit straight, you're going to get whacked. It's the laws of nature. Like Prabhupada's way of saying this over and over again. Fire burns. If a child touches fire, it's not the fire says, oh, he's a little child, I won't burn him. The laws of nature are there. And it's good to know what the laws of nature are, because they're there and they act. And the fact of the matter is that excessive attachment leads to suffering. The doors of liberation are open wide to one who has achieved human life. But if a human being simply devotes himself to family life, then he is considered as one who has climbed to a high place only to trip and fall down. It's just the law of nature. So best to know what laws of nature are, and to avoid misuse of the human form of life in this way. And that misuse of human form of life means, as Prabhupada would say, is no better than animal life. Because animals are doing these things and birds are doing these things, and if human does the same, it's no better. You have this door of liberation, this open situation, and you don't use it. You use it the same way lower species of life use it. So you don't use it properly, you lose it, gliding back down, etc. It's just a law of nature, not a threat. It's just a law of nature. It's how things are. Knowledge leads to detachment. So knowledge doesn't mean don't talk about certain things because somebody's sensibilities might be hurt. Oh, they're trying to scare me. It's a scare tactic. Someone may do scare tactic things. That's not what Krishna is doing. Uddhava is asked, how do I overcome? So one of the ways to overcome undue attachment is knowledge. This is the consequence. The other, before this story of the pigeon, the other 7 were describing elevation and purification and tolerance and simplicity and so forth. The virtues. And those that have that virtue of becoming purified, etc., of being very tolerant, etc., of having vitality from air within as prana and air without and so forth, then there's the possibility, through good association, of becoming attached to Atma or attached to Sat. And the consequence, reverse, is if there's too much attachment to the temporary, then that door is blocked. And there's consequences. At least the way this is narrated in the BBT purport, that the male bird willingly flew into the net because what's the use of life? Negative emotions and being driven by negative emotions, including up to suicide or despair or whatever degree, is being captured by the emotion of events of this world that are limited and temporary, and you don't see them properly. You don't respond properly because you don't see them properly, and life is futile. That's a great misfortune. Now, Prabhupada said it the way that he said it, and Krishna is saying it the way that he says it. Knowledge and detachment. To strengthen or give support to the bhakti process. Because the whole of the Bhagavatam, in one sense, is bhakti. The whole of Krishna's instruction to Uddhava, he's not, is not a neophyte. He's very advanced personality, taking the position like Arjuna of one who's too attached or one who doesn't know what his duty is, so that Krishna can instruct him. He's taking that position. Okay. 12 after the hour. Let's see if there's some discussion. Saval?
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. I've been I'm part of a large family, and I'm pretty much in contact with my family, and naturally observe this devotion that is there in the family, especially with my father. I have a strong relationship, and he's the patriarch of the very large family, and he's completely devoted. And now in his old age, he's basking on the whole love and affection and attachments, and it's an impossible thing basically to overcome that. It's basically his life, the family. Although he's open, because of affection to me, he's open to hear and to discuss and to research about, Gaudiya Vaishnavism. But for a person like that, and for people just like, this last verse, the 74, that is basically they're doomed to great suffering because of that position of attachment. That to bring them to the understanding of at least the understanding of the importance of detachment to actually overcome this. What could be some
strategies?
Strategies to bring this to them. One more thing before you answer, Guru Maharaj. There was a mention in the purpose of the acharyas, something about, I don't know if I missed it, but it says that you make it worshipable instead of, I'm talking about the tendency.
Yes, that was the commentary.
Yeah.
The movement when someone is attached is not likely. Doesn't mean don't do anything, but don't do anything is an option. But expectation of movement. So you're looking for strategies for movement. And I would say their attachment, in this case, your father's attachment to you, or in other circumstances, somebody's attachment to a devotee, is the best they're going to do in this life. They get Krishna points, spiritual benefit from that. Second is, don't lose your patience. And rather meaning, don't become irritated or, anything other than respectful, even though there's no movement. So if you have an expectation that doesn't match reality, then you're going to be frustrated. So don't have an expectation. So exhibit good qualities. And the third is when opportunity presents itself, without attachment to somebody gets it, in addition to behaving in appropriate times, you speak something. That is, may Krishna inspire you from within what to say at different times that can help, a little ray of light go in. And another option, this is the option that I've chosen. I'm not even going to try with my family members. They're they know who I am, and they don't know exactly what I am, but they know who I am, and their attachment from indirectly. I haven't said it explicitly. The best way I can give spiritual benefit to you is encourage your attachment for me. I don't say that, but I'm not investing energy in that because there's not a lot of traction. They're pious and religious. God is in their life, and I'm in their life. I'm not investing lots of energy in that area. With the confidence that my main project is to become pure, and the more I become pure, the more benefit will go to them. And this other comment, I found it interesting also. Worshipable, is a strong word. Worthy of respect, because you can learn something from this and that, and therefore worthy of respect, as opposed to here's an object for enjoyment or exploitation or ownership. So if one's heart is oriented in that way, then one can learn, even from elements, what to speak of other entities, because this keeps going. Worshipable. I would feel more appropriate, or more comfortable with respect as an antidote for object of enjoyment, exploitation mentality.
No.
Speak. Go ahead. Speak.
Yeah. Hare Krishna Maharaj. In this case, suppose I was thinking, if family is devoted to Krishna consciousness,
Who's devoted to Krishna?
if the whole family is devoted to Krishna consciousness,
You're devoted to Krishna.
The whole family is.
If a family member is devoted to Krishna
consciousness, then suppose like Jukta Vairagya principle will apply according to Rupa Goswami, then everything can be utilized for the service of Krishna. And so in that sense, then how to develop renunciation from the family members?
Without detachment?
Yes, renunciation.
Principle one can utilize.
Yeah.
So why should one, or how to be detached?
It's not It's undue. That was the word I was searching for. Undue or overly attached is ill-advised because of the temporary nature and because of the tendency to try to be the enjoyer of. So attachment, yes. Natural. Not undue. Overly attached. Because there's a nice verse that comes later in Uddhava Gita where Krishna says to Uddhava, a suitable candidate for bhakti is one who is not too much attached or too detached. Because too detached means impersonal. Too much attached means material. So a suitable candidate for bhakti is not too much attached, not too much detached. So it's not, the message is not that kind of detachment. The message is not undue attachment. So what's the difference? Due attachment is connected to Krishna. Because it's because of the connection to Krishna, recognizing the attachment to the connection with Krishna. It's for Krishna. Now that's bhakti. We're not there, but so we're either this or that, generally speaking, too much or too little. Okay?
Guru Maharaj, I have a lot of questions. One, I've heard you say this when you were summarizing this story in the beginning of classes, and you said this today as well, that the Avaduta Brahmana was sensually strong, and yet carrying on in a detached manner. Could you explain what is sensually strong?
Young, and it wasn't a weakling. It wasn't ill. It wasn't like, a wasted person. He wasn't. So you're not detached because you're like, what's the right word? Bedraggled. Nothing. Blob. Mm-hmm. You have capacity to be an enjoyer. Okay. But you're not indulging.
Okay.
So that I find that remarkable. In other words, many people think, okay, when I get old, I'll be detached when I get old. But you're young, you have strength, you have attractive features, but you're not indulging.
In the beginning of class, you said that some of the Yadu family members would be going to heaven, some to the spiritual world. You mentioned both heaven and the spiritual.
Just now?
Yes.
Some of the Yadu members went to heaven and someone went to the spiritual world. I didn't mention that.
Okay. So they're all members they're all returned to the spiritual kingdom.
All what?
They all returned to the spiritual kingdom.
I don't know if they all did, because some may have deviated. Okay. Some of the members of a royal family, even that royal family, may have deviated. So I don't know where they all went. But, to go to the spiritual world requires undivided devotion and Krishna's mercy.
Gumaraj, question about nature worship. In the second canto, we hear about nature worship.
Yes.
And I wanted to distinguish between, learning from nature, like is being explained here,
Good.
versus.
Good.
Could you please comment on that?
Sure. Pantheism is seeing God within nature, mm-hmm. or nature is God. Mm-hmm. And we've all probably been to situations where there's the majestic feature of nature, and it's awe-inspiring, the sense of God's presence in the awe-inspiring features of something within nature, of something. So that's pantheism when that's it. It's not, this is a vibhuti of God, it's God.
Okay.
And this other learning from nature or respecting nature, or even taking this, I'm not sure it's the best word, saying worshiping nature, is I can learn from how God has orchestrated things. So the difference is you're not losing sight of who's behind nature any more than you should not lose sight of someone that's a person. Bhagavat is Bhagavan. Mm-hmm. One who's speaking the words of Bhagavan is not Bhagavan. It's representative of Bhagavan. One can learn from them, but they're not the source of everything. So pantheism doesn't see what's behind.
And a continuation on the thought about anthropomorphism and this allegory. So I wasn't specifically speaking of the tendency for animals to take care of their young or to mate for life or experience emotions such as love and attachment. But when this allegory is referring to the pigeon considering her his wife, those kind of conceptions of marriage, is that not anthropomorphism?
Don't get stuck on this.
Okay.
Anthropomorphism, my understanding of what it means, at least commonly, is because we have a form like this, God has a form like our form. We're projecting humanness or human features to God when it's really just a projection of what we look like this, so God looks like this. That's anthropomorphism. Attributing human-like form and human-like qualities and human-like stuff and projecting it upon God, and that's anthropomorphism. But the other, as far as I can see, it's just conventional. Use of language, husband, wife, and children. Because there is something that's a semblance of that, so it's just a convenient use of language to use that language. You can use some other language, but that's not inappropriate. It's not anthropomorphism either. The male, female, bird or monkey or lion, lioness or whatever, cat and male and female cat. So they see in those terms, this is my mate. So you use the language husband, wife. That's just conventional.
Guru Maharaj, you were speaking about how attachment blocks transcendence and detachment facilitates it. And we see that when Hiranyakashipu is speaking, he's actually speaking with a lot of realization. It's not just, he's bringing in not just philosophy, but his realization of it. So could you please help me distinguish between the detachment that facilitates the knowledge that facilitates detachment versus the knowledge that Hiranyakashipu obviously has, which is not facilitating his relationship with Krishna?
A lot has to do with, it's two things. Obviously, he didn't buy into everything that he said because his revenge was, Vishnu killed my brother. It's a family attachment. And so Vishnu is my enemy. And I'm going to kill him. That was his absorption. Enough even that, not only I'll kill Vishnu, but anyone attached to my son, anyone, I'm going to kill them. So he's not following his own teachings. But, it's aside from Hiranyakashipu, there are persons who know, at least notionally, and can repeat, at least notionally, but it's incomplete unless and until there's attachment to the Supreme. And that's certainly not the case of Hiranyakashipu, or there may be others who are knowledgeable in the Vedas and have some sense of Brahman, but they're at the same time materially tinged, if not immersed. Theoretical knowledge that's not practically applied. He had to have some. How could he undergo the austerities that he underwent? His body was being eaten up by ants. Get a little mosquito bite or a gnat or something that's biting in your skin it's ooh. So his consciousness, it wasn't just a stoic. He had to have shelter or something. No, it's part of the shelter was he wanted. Anyway.
So this narration of the pigeons it brought to mind here the male pigeon had lost his intelligence. Seen the distressed condition of the wife and the babies, and so he ended up losing his life too. I found myself thinking of human beings in family situations, and sometimes it's interesting because what seems to emerge in some sort of difficult situation where there's the impending loss of a spouse or a child is that the other spouse will take the position of being completely concerned about themselves. So I was reflecting that that kind of attachment that the male pigeon had, it was because he was identifying so much with the wife and the children as being part of himself. And so in the situation where, say, a human spouse is facing the loss of their spouse or their partner, but the response is one of being concerned for themselves and the maintenance of themselves with the absence of the other spouse. That also has to do with selfishness, but yet it's not identifying so much with the other spouse. So does that point to a kind of less attachment, or is it just the same problem of selfishness just taking a different face?
Yeah, extended selfishness. Mm-hmm. It can be different. Yeah. Where the dial reads can vary, even in a situation like that. But yes, it's a fact. Extended selfishness. This is me. When one becomes so invested, unduly invested in mine, and when there's the loss of mine, it's the loss of me. It's about me. I and mine. Material. I was thinking, this is not what you were commenting, but I was thinking about this. When he willingly entered into the net, can mean literally willingly he entered into the net, but it could also mean the will to live waned so much so that the time energy death in the form of time energy took away his life. Because the hunter, in one sense, is the time energy, that which destroys. So when that significant part of himself, which was the extension of selfishness, was taken, there's no will to live. And some people are like that. It doesn't have to be family members, it can just be money. Prabhupada tells stories like that. Some wealthy person lost his money, and he died shortly thereafter because he had no will to live. If you don't have will to live, you don't live. Entering into the net. Online?
This is from Shilpa Singh. My son is intimidated by thoughts of death very often.
Intimidated by?
Thoughts of death.
Thoughts of death, okay.
Very often, several times a day. What should we do to help the situation?
Help him understand he's eternal. He's not going to die. Knowledge and detachment. And if it continues, maybe it's not just knowledge. Maybe it's something else. Maybe he needs some medication.
This is from Archana Vaidya. How to differentiate between discomfort, disliking, and detachment?
How do we differentiate between discomfort, disliking, and
attachment?
Attachment?
No, detachment.
Detachment. Well, detachment is at the other end of the spectrum, and disliking,
discomfort.
Well, we generally we don't like discomfort, so you dislike that which is it was uncomfortable. So it seems like they, if not the same, they're two peas in the same pod. I'm uncomfortable, so I don't like something. And detachment is, it has no impact or effect.
Snehavali. Small clarification. So too much attachment to spiritual things are encouraged, as suggested in Srimad Bhagavatam 10:14:3. Is that the correct understanding?
Oh, yes. It's never too much. Go mad for attachment to spiritual things. May you become mad for Krishna's name and Krishna's deity form and the Bhagavatam. May you go mad. Too much attachment.
And follow up from Archana Vaidya. In our lives, we are engaging in devotional service and trying to engage others in our limited capacity. Is this message of detachment to inspire, to go beyond, and expand our capacity to perform devotional service and engage others?
Well, not only it's by design and intention, it's the natural, attachment to Krishna means detachment from matter. Detachment from Krishna means attachment to matter. So move towards attachment to that which is spiritual Krishna, Krishna's devotees, the holy name, etc., etc. Detachment will follow. Slackening of the bewildering attachment to things that are temporary will slacken. Okay. Prabhupada ki? Okay.